3 days before my wedding, I got a phone call that made my stomach drop. My wedding florist said my entire order had been canceled. The strange part, the person who canceled it used my mother's name. And that was the moment I realized my own mom might be trying to destroy my wedding. My name is Natalie Foster, and growing up in a quiet town outside Denver, Colorado, my relationship with my mom was always complicated. From the outside, people thought we were close. She showed up to every school event, every birthday party, every graduation photo. But behind closed doors, she always had a way of making me feel like my life was somehow a reflection of her choices rather than my own. When I was 16 and told her I wanted to study journalism, she smiled politely and said, "That's sweet, Natalie, but maybe you should pick something more realistic." When I moved out at 22 and started building my own life, she called it a phase. And when I met Daniel, the man I eventually fell in love with, she didn't even try to hide her disappointment. I still remember the first dinner they met. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and Daniel was nervously telling her about his small tech startup. My mom stirred her tea slowly and said with a tight smile, "So, you don't have a real job yet?" The room went quiet. Daniel handled it gracefully, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. From that moment on, she never really approved of him. Still, when we got engaged 2 years later, she hugged me and said all the right words. "Of course I'm happy for you," she insisted, but something about her smile felt forced, like she was playing a role rather than sharing the moment. Wedding planning started like a dream. I found a beautiful outdoor venue, surrounded by pine trees and mountain air, booked the photographer, the caterer, the florist, everything slowly coming together. My mom even offered to help organize a few things, which I thought might finally be her way of supporting me. Looking back now, that's probably where the trouble started. About a month before the wedding, little strange things began happening. The baker emailed asking why I wanted to change the cake design to something completely different. The DJ called to confirm a cancellation I never requested. Each time I thought it must be some kind of mistake, a scheduling mix-up or an email glitch. But then came the call from the florist. "Natalie," the woman said gently over the phone, "I just wanted to confirm your cancellation before we refund the deposit." My heart skipped. "What cancellation?" I asked. There was a pause. Then she said something that made the room spin. "Your mother called this morning and said the wedding wasn't happening anymore." I sat there staring at my phone, my hands shaking. Part of me wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe someone pretended to be her. Maybe there was a mistake, but deep down, I knew my mom had always believed Daniel wasn't good enough for me. That night, I drove to my parents' house, my thoughts racing the entire way. When she opened the door, she looked completely calm, like nothing in the world was wrong. I stepped inside, my voice trembling slightly as I asked the question that had been echoing in my head all evening. "Mom, did you call my wedding vendors today?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then she sighed softly and crossed her arms. "Natalie," she said, "I was just trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life." And in that moment, I realized the truth. My own mother had been secretly sabotaging my wedding for weeks. But what she didn't know yet was that her plan was about to completely fall apart. For a few seconds after she said those words, the house felt eerily quiet, like the air itself had frozen. I stared at my mother, trying to process what I had just heard. "You canceled my wedding vendors?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shrugged slightly, as if she had simply returned the wrong item at a store. "I'm your mother, Natalie. It's my job to protect you. That man isn't stable. A startup. That's not a real future." I felt something inside me snap, not anger exactly, but clarity. For years I had tried to earn her approval, to prove that my choices were valid, that my life belonged to me. And suddenly I understood that approval was never coming. I took a slow breath and said, "The wedding is still happening." Her eyebrows lifted. "Not if I can help it." What she didn't realize was that the florist had already told me something else during that earlier phone call. When my mother canceled the order, the florist had thought it seemed strange, so she recorded the conversation for confirmation. The next morning, I began calling every vendor personally, explaining the situation, and reinstating the bookings. Most of them were incredibly supportive. Some even laughed in disbelief when they heard what had happened. Within 2 days, everything was back on track, but I didn't tell my mom. The wedding day arrived on a bright summer afternoon, sunlight filtering through tall pine trees at the venue. Guests filled the white chairs, soft music floating through the air, flowers exactly where they were supposed to be. When my mom arrived and stepped out of her car, I saw the confusion on her face immediately. She looked around at the decorations, the guests, the ceremony arch covered in roses, all the things she thought she had canceled. Her expression turned pale. During the reception, after Daniel and I said our vows, I walked over to her quietly. She looked stunned. How is this happening? She asked under her breath. I simply smiled and said, because people who love me actually support my choices. Later that evening, when the speeches began, I stood up and looked out at the crowd of family and friends who had gathered to celebrate with us. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. I talked about love, independence, and the importance of building a life based on trust rather than control. And then I said something I'll never forget. Sometimes the hardest part of growing up is realizing that even the people closest to you don't always know what's best for your life. The room went quiet for a moment, then filled with applause. Daniel squeezed my hand, and I felt this overwhelming sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Because the truth is, that day wasn't just about getting married. It was about finally choosing my own future. And if you've ever had someone in your life try to control your path or doubt your decisions, maybe this story will resonate with you. If it does, take a second to like this video and subscribe for more real stories like this. And I'm always curious where everyone is watching from, so drop your country or city in the comments below. As for my mom, our relationship changed after that day. Not overnight and not perfectly, but for the first time, she understood something important. I wasn't the little girl she could control anymore. I was a woman capable of building her own life, making her own choices, and standing strong when someone tried to tear them down. And honestly, that might have been the most powerful vow I made that entire day.